Chapter 37. Mount Hua hadn't changed much. The wind blowing into it was the same. The old buildings were the same. What changed wasn't Mount Hua, but the people who lived there. Jogul took off his uniform. The sweat was pouring down from the uniform as he threw it off. After morning training, his entire body was steeped in sweat, and he couldn't stay without changing clothes. Man, today's training was really hard. Really? It's so much to do right at dawn. As he heard that, Jogul smiled bitterly. The people around him were also hoping to get a clean bath. Together, they washed their bodies and sweaty clothes in the ice-cold stream. Jogul, who put on a new uniform, packed his laundry and said, "Let's get going." "Yes, Sahyung." The others picked up their robes and started going up. Looking at the people walking ahead, Jogul had no choice but to think about it. A lot has changed. In the past, such a sight couldn't be dreamed of. Although the other third-class disciples were training, they weren't passionate about martial arts. Even Yunjong and Jogul were the same. But now, everyone was voluntarily coming out for practice at dawn. There was no end to their complaints, but they never rebelled against it. What would one call this scene? It feels like a martial arts sect. Jogul smiled bitterly. Looking at the disciples walking up, they all looked like martial artists' disciples. Did that mean that Mount Hua was nothing until now? Why are you smiling like that? At the voice next to him, Jogul turned his head and looked at his great Sahyung, Yunjong. "Ah, Sahyung, it's a bit embarrassing to say, but I was thinking about how everyone seems so much like a true martial artist now. Is that so? It's a bit of a strange thought, though." "No, I was thinking the same." Jogul finally laughed out loud. Not long ago, Jogul had never imagined that he would train to this extent on Mount Hua. He did everything instructed in his dorm, but it was half-heartedly done so he could finish and go back to resting. Jogul's goal was to pass the time and then descend and return home. No, it was everyone's goal in Mount Hua. Could he genuinely feel passionate about this? Lately, it felt like something had changed. Not only him, but the eyes of the other disciples had changed too. It has to be because of him. Jogul thought of Chongmyung's weird behavior. Chongmyung was changing Mount Hua. It was clearly a small wind that most people couldn't even feel, but it was bound to turn into a strong wind or a typhoon that would shake Mount Hua. The result of these changes will be evident in the future. Walking up the mountain, Jogul, who reached Mount Hua, straightened his shoulders and touched his chest. A faint feeling of pride began to swell inside his chest. But then, the pride he felt flew away into the open sky. "Hey, you shouldn't touch that. Move, move, move. We're going to push all the materials inside and then start working. Are you deaf or something? You, if you fall there, you won't get any pay for a month. If just to climb up here is tough, then what are you worth?" Jogul blankly stared at the figures in front of Mount Hua. His gaze shifted from left to right. What? Who are those people? People he had never met were walking up. Everyone had tools and materials which he had never seen before. "You! No, not there! This way!" It was comforting to see someone he recognized in the group of strangers. Eunam was standing among the crowd giving instructions. Sahyung, Yunjong, who received Jogul's gaze, walked towards Eunam with a blank expression. "Sasuk." "Huh? Yunjong. What is all this?" "Oh." Eunam smiled brightly. He usually wasn't the kind to explain such things, even to Yunjong, the eldest of the third-class disciples. But now, Eunam was in a good mood. "They're workers." "Workers?" "Yes. You know that many of our buildings are a bit old, right?" "Yes." Not old. Ancient would be the right word. Even Mount Hua's nameplate on the front gate was crumbling, and if a strong wind blew, it seemed many buildings would collapse. At least the place where the disciples stayed and trained were constantly repaired and maintained. But the other buildings were left without management due to a lack of manpower. "With our current opportunity, we plan on repairing the area. We'll re-establish the place." "Huh? Don't just keep looking. Go and help carry the materials. It seems like all the workers are having difficulty bringing the materials up here. Most of the wood can be acquired by cutting trees nearby, but it seems they have some wood that they can't find nearby." "Huh?" "Move fast. Move already. Hurry." Looking at Eunam shouting with a smile, Jogul had a blank expression. Maybe the change was faster than he expected. What is going on? Jogul looked at the dining table in shock. His hunger-soaked stomach was rumbling after carrying the materials up, but looking at the food on the table, he was more flustered than hungry. What is all this? Am I dreaming? No matter how I try to look at it, isn't this meat? The other Sahyungs wore the same skeptical expression. All eyes in the hall were fixed on the table. Something extraordinary was on the table. There was meat being served. They really served us meat? To kill a living being, cook and serve it to us, sacred martial artists. What a windfall. Something must be wrong. Jogul smiled grandly. In Mount Hua, there was no prohibition on the consumption of meat. Mount Hua did have a rule that condemned eating meat in the long past, but it had changed as Mount Hua developed. Vegetarianism was recommended, but meat wasn't prohibited. But allowing them to eat meat and actively putting meat on the table were two different things. It had been years since the disciples entered Mount Hua, and it was their first time seeing meat on the table. Can I eat this? They put it on the table so that it would be eaten. Everyone looked at Yunjong. If their Sasuks were not there, the decision maker would be the great Sahyung, Yunjong. Yunjong smiled and said, "Let's eat. The food is getting cold." Yes. Jogul sat down at a loss for words and felt a piercing gaze. All the Sahyungs were looking at Jogul. No, to be precise, they were looking at Yunjong, who was next to Jogul, with fiery eyes. Yunjong, who understood it, grabbed his chopsticks and picked up a piece of meat, and the moment he put it in his mouth, pop, 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 chopsticks came flying into the meat bowl from all directions. Some were directly throwing it into their mouths too. When Jogul saw that, it seemed so absurd that he wanted to scream, but then he didn't. Jogul's chopsticks also flew like lightning. If I am late, I won't get any. Out of the way, my meat! 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 Seeing the fragments of meat scattered everywhere, Yunjong closed his eyes. Mount Hua. The Mount Hua he knew was becoming strange. Well, the longer you live, the more changes you'll experience. Right. They started construction all of a sudden, and now meat is being served for our meals. We even got 2 new uniforms, right? Yes. Yunjong narrowed his eyes as if thinking about something. Seeing that, Jogul asked, "What are you thinking?" "I think the money is quite good." Jogul laughed. Even if others didn't hear it, it felt weird hearing such things from Yunjong. No matter how much money we have, I didn't expect the seniors to change so quickly. Did you think they would purposely keep their disciples poor? They just couldn't help it in the past. That was right. It wasn't that meat was prohibited. It was because meat was expensive. It was something that couldn't be done because of the lack of money, so they are doing it now that they have money. But isn't it weird? Jogul nodded his head. Didn't you see Sasuk Unam who couldn't hide his smile on his lips? Right. They all saw it. Jogul could swear that it was his first time seeing Unam smile so brightly. Who could have even imagined that Unam could smile like that? What was certain was that Mount Hua had clearly entered a path of change. Sahyung, what do you think will happen now? It was a broad question, but Yunjong understood what Jogul was asking. You should know it too, right? Mount Hua is changing. Yes. So we need to be prepared. Prepared? It isn't just about money. You saw it too, in that chest. Yes, there were books. The scene where the sect leader yelled the name of some martial arts and almost fainted. Mount Hua is changing. We won't be able to avoid the change, so we need to strengthen ourselves. Then, won't we be able to see something different from what we originally expected? Jogul nodded his head. Is it all because of him? Jogul couldn't shake the suspicion that Chomyung's manipulation was what caused this whole situation. That obviously bad acting in front of the chest. Jogul shook his head. What did he do? Do you think we'll be able to know? Even though no names were mentioned, they both knew who he referred to. What's certain is that there's no way to predict that jerk's actions ahead of time. We need to remain alert. If we approach this with clumsy determination, we might end up being swept away in the storm he creates. Don't worry, Sahyung. I'm Jogul. Right. Yunjong smiled and headed back to the dorm. A slightly different thought lingered on Jogul's mind. No way to predict. Jogul had a different idea. Maybe Chomyung wasn't someone that only the disciples, but even the Sasuks and sect leader couldn't handle. By the way, where is he? I haven't seen him since this morning. Didn't you hear? The sect leader was looking for him today. He's probably at the sect leader's place. Sect leader? Why was the sect leader looking for him? How could I know? As Yunjong shrugged his shoulders, Jogul sighed. I really can't understand him.